reason that I'm here is because the club is seeking change.
He said, well, whether you come or not, you're going to see a completely different Spurs team under me.
My hope and my desire and what I'm going to try and do is give our supporters hope and belief that we're going to embark on something special.
Welcome into the Tottenham Depot. I am your host, Andrew. You can follow me at Stetka. You can follow us at Tottenham Depot. This is episode 222, if you will. We've got a lot to talk about this week as Spurs are in the Europa League, but for how much longer, we will find out this week. And a comeback victory over Bournemouth to discuss. Not victory. What am I saying? Comeback draw against Bournemouth to discuss as well. We'll start by throwing it out to the Toddfather. He is at TC_Kasho on X and at the Toddfather on Blue Sky. TC, what is up, my man?
What's up? Any day, sir, any day that you can talk about not losing a match in the Premier League is a good fucking day, apparently, at least this season. So we didn't lose today, and I think that's a great place to start. That is about the only ray of sunshine that I've been able to pluck from this last week in Tottenham land. So we are where we are.
Yeah, we didn't lose, but we also didn't win, like I just tried to give us a second ago. Caroline is also here. See, she's at CG Stefko. Kaz, what's up with you on this fine Sunday?
Well, I'm a little tired from the time change, but, overall, I've kind of been ignoring Tottenham and just enjoying the return of American soccer with the Challenge Cup and then USL kicking off this weekend. So, yeah, everything's chill.
I'm wide awake because we don't change our clocks here in Arizona, so I'm rip-roaring and ready to go. I'll try to carry, for anyone who's lost an hour listening to this, I will try to carry the energy through. Scott will as well. I know that. He is at Scott G. Bird. Scott, what's up, man?
Chilling. Been a tough sports weekend. Iowa State falls out of the women's Big 12 tournament. Obviously, Tottenham somehow drew after a torrid performance at home. Dynamo drew 0-0. Dynamo and Spurs are extremely parallel at the moment. They have all of the ball and can do absolutely fuck all with it. But yeah, I watched a ton of White Lotus, which turns out to be a fantastic show. So it's been a decent weekend.
That is true. We're looking forward to another episode, and all of that. I'm on board with. I'm a little confused by the Iowa State and then the Dynamo. Like, why would Dynamo want to be like Spurs? First of all, that's not something to reach out for.
It's an excellent question. If I was any sporting organization, I would do the opposite of anything Tottenham Hotspur does. But
I disagree entirely. That sucks. And the only reason why is because if you look at everything not on the field, we're the best run sports organization on the planet, and it sucks.
Maybe I should rephrase that and say anything sporting specific. But
yeah, that's fair.
I was going to say it's just a shame that they actually play the games on the field. That's where
I know,
people mostly pay attention to this stuff. Before we dive into the Spurs conversation, want to remind everyone to head over to digitalspurs.com for some of the best Tottenham merch you can find out there. You can see Todd on our video at youtube.com/Tottenham Devo. He's displaying his hoodie. I've got my Tottenham hoodie on today from digitalspurs.com. Hoodies, t-shirts, crew necks, hats, all kinds of different apparel. Let them know that we here at the Tottenham Depot sent you. Digitalspurs.com for your Tottenham merch. Guys, you want to start with Bournemouth? A 2-2 draw here today on Sunday as we record, and it wasn't great. I'm still kind of trying to wrap my mind around. It's only been about 30-40 minutes since this game went full time, and I'm still trying to figure out how Spurs managed to salvage a point from this, because they kind of got their ass kicked, similar to Thursday where they got their ass kicked. But they were down 2-0 in the second half and managed to scrape it across and get the point. It doesn't really change much in terms of certainly the table or the attitude or the mindset, but it is a point. TC, what can we take from this? I don't really know where to start. I feel like Ricky Bobby. I don't know what to do with my hands after this.
No, I completely understand what you're talking about, man. It's because we brought it up in the pre-show, and I don't want to steal your thunder, Kaz, but Caroline mentioned that, even though we have all of these players back, it doesn't feel like we have our team back yet. And I think that that's very much the feeling that we're feeling. It's like like we're at the, poke the thing at the stick meme. Like, all right, come on, do something. Like that's where we're at with this club. It's like, okay, we've been saying like, let us get healthy. And all of a sudden the results will start coming. And then we watch the football matches on the pitch and it's like, God, you guys look like you're stuck in mud right now. Like we don't, to Scott's point, we have all of the ball and can do fuck all with it. It's so rare that I've watched a football match, Andrew, where we were down 2-0 in the second half, drew 2-2, and I thought we should have won that game.
Did you think we should have won that game?
When you look at the way that we played in the second half, the Sarr miss specifically, the first when Madison tippy-toed in the box, set Sarr up at the top of the 18, and Sarr absolutely shanks it. Just hooked it, Andrew. And, you look at chances like that, you look at a couple other chances at the back post, and you go, well, and then you look at the stats, and you go, well, I don't know. From my perspective, I feel like there was a couple more goals in that for us.
I think there was probably more goals for Bournemouth that didn't happen, or at least arguably the same amount.
Yeah, that's fair.
And honestly, I think in this game, we got outplayed hands down. I think we got outmanaged. I think and that's not even a shot at Ange. I think Iraola is just a fantastic tactician who's proven that time and time again this season. Let's not forget, Bournemouth for 2 months were missing 9 of their first 11. So they've had a massive injury crisis too, and they're competing for Champions League. They're a good side, but yeah, I think we got smoked today. I think that we easily could have lost that game by a couple goals as well. And honestly, the 2 goals we scored, that's one of the worst crosses you'll ever see. That just went in the back of the net. It was.
I'm gonna push. No, I'm pushing back on that.
No, dude, he went absolute bins on that. Come on, man.
That was a cross. No way, Popstar is trying to bank that off the post, from that.
My friend, he saw Kepa was out. I think that was a shot.
His reaction.
I think was crossing like, oh.
Well, no, because what's he gonna say? Like he hit a banger. Like Pop. Like he's gonna hit you with one of these. If anything.
That was a cross to Dom, and it was very poor.
I feel like it could have gone either way on that. I'm gonna give the tie goes to the striker in this instance and say that he meant to put that top ends.
Well, let's dive in a little bit because for me, Todd, I get what you're saying. Like you feel like there could have been more goals there. I feel like I would agree more with Scott, not with the Popstar cross thing, because I think that's I'm sorry it's 3-1 on you there, Scott, but like. With Bournemouth being able to score more goals, I definitely feel like they should have. They ended up with almost 3 XG as opposed to just their 2 goals. Like there was more in this for them. And the defending and specifically the midfield. When I saw this midfield come out with the 11, I thought, okay, I like seeing Popstar play. I like what he can do. I thought he was one of the better players on the pitch for Spurs today, not just because of the goal that was definitely not a cross, but just his overall play. And the other 2 guys, they're doing nothing for me right now. Basuma and Bentancur. I mean, Bentancur's had a few decent, okay weeks, but Basuma offered nothing and was yanked at halftime. And I never knew exactly what Spurs were going to try with this midfield, specifically in front of this defense, which has a returning Christian Romero playing alongside Danso for the first time. I always knew that was kind of going to be a little bit of a mystery, Caroline. And I wonder where the solution can be, because like you're talking about not having, it feels like we don't have a lot of the pieces back. For me, it's the pieces are back, but none of these guys have played together. I mean, Danso is being introduced to Romero, to playing with Romero. I know they've trained together, but this is different. It's a game. It's on the big stage. So like, there's part of that for me is that with all of these pieces coming back, a lot of these guys simply haven't been on the pitch together. And I think that's a little bit of what we're feeling.
Right. And I think we had talked last episode about how we were thinking it was more likely to see Danzo and Van de Ven paired together. And I do think it worked a little bit better in the second half when that was, the eventual switch. But the defense was bad. Like there's no getting around that. But I feel like the midfield was worse. Bentancur and Basuma were just diabolical the entire game that they were in. And I also am having serious concerns about Pedro Porro. Like he's gotten the rest, but his game hasn't come back. So I don't know. I feel something's going on there. And I do think, besides the moment where Vicario gave us all a heart attack playing out of the back,
Which one?
he actually, well, there was one very significant one, which I'm sure everyone
Yes.
can recall. But I think he had a really strong game overall. And actually, something that I liked from him was seeing that he's really worked on his corner strategy. I felt like he was much stronger, like he was coming out for those balls to capture them. He was being more physical in the box. So he's hearing the feedback and he's acting on it. So that's great. And I felt like he was definitely one of the few bright spots in this game. But I do think, as far as was it a good draw goes, I feel like we need to just take this point and not look back and forget this game happened.
Yeah, I mean, the point in the long run, does it mean anything? Does it mean Spurs may be able to finish top half of the table? I think that's the only thing we can really say at this point. They were talking during the match on comms about how Spurs are not mathematically eliminated from earning a European spot, but I'm not there. I'm done with that thought. The only way that Spurs are going to get back into Europe next year is if they go on to win the Europa League, in my mind, and I'm settled with that, and that's fine. But I want to double click real quickly on the point you made on Vicario. Not only is he taking charge with the corners a little bit, I'm seeing a lot more leadership out of him too on the pitch, just vocal leadership. And at times it looks a little bit mean even, which I'm okay with. I mean, he looks pretty pissed at certain points. And why shouldn't he be? Because guys are giving the ball away. Yeah, exactly. I mean, he was even getting into Jed Spence's ass a little bit in this one, which fine. If guys are making mistakes, let them know it and fix it. That's, to an extent, that's what we've asked for a little bit out of Vicario. I think in his first season, we were like, okay, he's getting his feet wet. Now we're really seeing him kind of grab the reins a little bit. Scott, what have you seen there?
Well, the first thing I'll say is when Carolyn talking about Vicario's mistake playing out the back, that was hilarious to me because Vicario turns around and screams at Van de Ven, and Van de Ven's like, bro, that was Bergvall. Like, I was not, I know we're both tall, blonde men, but that was not me. Like, that was Lucas Bergvall. And that was probably Vicario's fault. Vicario is just a passionate dude, but I couldn't agree with you more. I think he's the most natural leader we have on the pitch. I've said it before on the show. I don't mean this to sound just like aggressive. I can't think of a better word, right? But I think the captain has to be somebody who's willing to light his teammates up and hold his teammates accountable and be the manager on the pitch. And I think we've been missing that as far as our outfield leadership contingent goes. Granted, Romero hasn't played in 300 days or something like that, but it's nice to see Vicario willing to hold people accountable because the manager is not able to do that during a live match, and that's why the captain has to be an extension of the manager. And right now we're a team that needs to be held to much more account than we have been.
So I think that this is the perfect opportunity for the segue into how much we're missing Decky, because in the last two matches, specifically, his presence or his absence has been just such a hole for us, Andrew. And I think that on-field leadership that Scotty's talking about, and that, the ability to light his teammates up and get in the referee's ear, like Decky does that exceptionally well. Clearly, we found out this week, Andrew, that he has been nursing a foot problem for the majority of the season. And it just now got overbearing, which I think kind of goes a long way to why we haven't seen as many shots from Decky. And
or just play in general. Like his form has dipped in the last handful of weeks because of this. And I think we all kind of knew it, but it was just going unsaid. He's been overplayed and we knew that. And he really picked up the load for much of this injury crisis between, injuries to Brendan Johnson and Wilson Odobert, and Sonny's missed some time, and like all these guys out on the wings, the Timo Werner of it all, like whoever you want to throw out there, Decky has, and even injuries in the midfield, he's stepped in there. I mean, he's been everywhere. So yeah, he's definitely been missing and will be missing now. We don't really know for how long. They initially last week said he would miss the first leg against Alkmaar and this Bournemouth match, kind of leaving it up to we'll see about next week. But I wouldn't expect to see him before the international break, which would be two more matches, the second leg against Alkmaar and then Fulham next weekend. So It's I don't know, man. I do think that they're certainly missing something from a leadership standpoint with Decky, but even more than that, I think just on the pitch, this team at times lacks somebody who can just take control of the ball and
that Alkmaar game.
We can't progress the ball without Kula. We can't progress the ball without Kulusevski. It's impossible, and it's been that way all season. Like, he's the only one that can dig the ball out of the back. That's a massive fucking problem.
It's hold up play, it's progression, it's all of those things, and yeah, like. You see, to your point, like he hasn't been taking the shots and he hasn't been racking up the goals and assists, the goal contributions, but he's been doing like all the other stuff. And this is certainly a big miss. And I don't, the other problem I had with the lineup today, and I say problem in the heaviest of air quotes, is that when you've got a leading line of Wilson Odegaard, Dom Solanke, and Brennan Johnson, I'm not sure what we're doing there. Like, I'm not sure who is the creativity, especially behind, when you've got a midfield that doesn't include Kulusevski, it doesn't include James Maddison. Now, Maddison did come on in this game, but like it didn't have Bergvall in it. Like, there was no creativity from from the midfielders and the front three.
No, you could totally tell that this was designed to play in, up the line and in the channels, and we didn't do it well.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't able to connect on those lengthy like they were trying, but every time there's a lengthy ball, somebody's got to go chase it down, and if somebody can't chase it down, it's just given back to Bournemouth in that spot. And when the fullbacks are trying to press forward too, you're going to leave yourself that much more exposed at the back. Like you can't rely on your creativity always coming from Pedro Porro, because that leaves you so exposed at the back. And Caroline,
and clearly I was going to say, clearly that's why, they made the change at halftime to bring on some more creativity. Like Ange saw that it wasn't working.
Yeah. Caroline mentioned Porro earlier and like, not sure what's going on with him. I agree with you, but also I would add on to that. That's what Porro's asked to do. Porro's not asked to be a defender, even though he's a fullback. Like, he's asked to get forward, be creative, try to stir shit, try to get crosses. Like, he'll defend when he's back in a defensive position and forced to, but like he's not going to do it out of like choice. He's going to do it out of necessity, and that's kind of the player that he's become. And I can at least accept that when the rest of the team is built in a way that it allows to do that. This team today, this 11, was not built in order to do that. So that's kind of what made it tough.
It's all the midfield on that point. I think people maybe want to say Johnson, and I'm not talking to you guys, but Johnson and Odegaard had poor games. They were kind of non-existent, but when the midfield can't control any sense of the ball, you can't make runs, you can't find space, you can't play off the midfield. So Johnson and Odegaard were fine. Johnson really struggles to beat his man, but that's not really what he's asked to do. He's asked to get behind the line, and you can't when the midfield doesn't have any of the ball. And on the fullbacks too, Porro definitely stood out in a poor sense more than Spence did, but the midfield also is expected to help defend those quadrants of the field, and the midfield was just all over the place. Honest to God, at one point, you had all three of them higher than Dom in the box, and Bournemouth countered and almost scored. And I wonder why that was, right? So I don't understand how the midfield could be so poor. And obviously Ange saw it and yanked Basuma, who I'll just say I hope to never see him start or play for Spurs ever again at this point. And that feels harsh that he's a human being, but like, I haven't been a fan from the jump. You all know why that is. I probably will never be a fan of his, right? But
I got bad news for you, buddy. He's probably playing Thursday. Like,
I hope it's RD Gray, man, and I don't think it will be. But Basuma is an absolute liability in this match, and he will be on Thursday.
Well, speaking of liabilities, like, let's be honest, Romero may as well have not been on the pitch.
Yeah.
For all he contributed.
Okay, we needed Romero to get minutes and legs. I would rather have him look like a newborn gazelle against fucking Bournemouth in a match.
I'd take a gazelle. He'd have some speed.
Yeah,
fair enough. Sure. But what I'm looking for is he needs to get tread back on the tires. Anybody who's ever played at any sort of a level knows it doesn't matter. Like, fitness versus game fitness is entirely different. Yeah. It's just entirely different. And you can't simulate that in practice, no matter how hard you try.
And honestly, I think like my theory is that the team selection was intentional today in the sense that there were players that Ange wanted to just kind of get out there and get them some minutes. And then there were players he wanted to come on early in the second half and, build up some momentum before the second leg. Did the strategy work out? Not really, in the sense that like we were completely hapless in defense in the first half. And that really, necessitated us making such a frantic comeback. But again, we're kind of in the situation where the league games just don't really matter that much. So why get worked up about it?
Yeah,
I don't know.
That was my big point is Ange will say he's not prioritizing Europa League, but he quite obviously is prioritizing Europa League. And he should
which is fine.
Whether we finish 13th or 8th, I could honestly give a shit less. I couldn't give a shit less, right? But when you look at back to all the way back to City, right? When you play Poro against Doku and then play Spence against Alkmaar, logic would tell you flip those two things, right? Spence is going to keep Doku quiet and Poro is going to eat Alkmaar alive against a lesser opponent, right? So, but Spence is a better player, so you play Spence, and hindsight's always 20/20, right? So, anyways, his decisions are very clearly prioritizing Europa League. We'll talk about it. It obviously didn't work at all last Thursday, right? The prioritization, but again, we'll get to that.
I feel like there may be a little bit of gamesmanship here from Ange regarding the fact that this is a two-legged tie, and he sent out not our strongest squad in the first leg because, to be fair, we didn't really have everybody available in our strongest squad. Dom made a cameo, got hurt immediately. Mickey made a cameo, or Mickey played, but these types of things were working people slowly back in, going, well, if I can just get out of here with, down a goal or at a draw, then we can, have some fresh legs, all of our horses, and go into the second leg with a better strategy as to how to beat them. And it's at home and it works out in his favor. I don't know, man. It could just be me doing everything that I can from San Diego, California, to will this team and this manager to stop fucking up my days consistently. I don't know. But what I do know is that I'm going to have faith until there is no faith to have.
Well, that's the way you have to go about it, I think. And look, this is a perfect opportunity to kind of, unless you guys had anything else on the Bournemouth match, which I think we kind of kicked around here for 20 minutes or so. It's a draw. It's a league match. As everyone knows, we here at the Tottenham Depot are all big cup guys. So it's a league
huge
match.
Cup guy.
What do you want? But with Alkmaar on Thursday, a 1-0 defeat and one shot on goal, like I hear what you guys are saying about what Ange is or isn't prioritizing. And I want to talk in a minute. I want to go back to Christian Romero and talk about prioritization there too. But this was, to me, by the end of it, I was like, thank God this was only 1-0, because it very easily could have been 2-0. It could have been 3-0. It could have been 3-1. It could have been a number of different things. The fact that this is 1-0 gives me confidence still. Like you're saying, TC, like you're just trying to keep the faith until there's no faith to keep no more. And like that, when we get to Thursday night, there very well may not be. Like this week all of a sudden could be the end of Tottenham's season, for lack of a better term. It could be the end of Ange Postecoglou. Like, we just don't know. And that's the fact that we're in this spot already in mid-March is what I think for me is just a little bit disconcerting. Like I'm to a point where I don't like that. I obviously don't like that feeling as a Spurs fan.
Well, no, and this isn't something that we felt as Spurs fans for a long, long time. Like, we've had dips in form, obviously, but we're a member of the Big Six for a reason. Like, in our time as Tottenham fans, have seen a lot of years of relative success. Now, granted, there's been no trophies and we don't need to go down that road. But as far as we haven't been on par with Fulham and Crystal Palace, Andrew. Like, we've been fighting for Champions League spots and beating City at the Etihad and things like that. So, okay, last thing that I want to say on this particular topic is this is not going to be the end of Ange Postecoglou. It's not. Financially, It doesn't make any fucking sense for Levy to fire Ange before the end of the season. He will owe him so much more money by firing him before the end of the season than he will in the offseason that it's ridiculous to even have this conversation. So please stop talking about it.
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily think Andrew was saying he'd get sacked Thursday night. I think you could.
No, I think it would be Friday morning.
I'm more with Todd. I think this. I think if we get knocked out of Europa League, especially if it happens this week, Ange will be let go at the end of the season. But I think at the end of the season, I just think there's no point to do it any sooner. But honestly, like if we finish bottom half of the table and no trophies, I don't really know how you can do otherwise, other than part ways. Whether that's fair or not.
I don't know, dude. I think that's harsh. Because we go back to the same conversation that we've had this entire season, which is how are you going to judge the guy when he doesn't have his players?
Like I said earlier, I'm playing devil's advocate here, right? I'm not advocating for the sacking of Postecoglou, but Iraola had an injury crisis that was comparable to ours, and they're competing for Champions League, and I think why that is he is more of a manager who will look at what's available to him and change things pretty drastically based on what his squad looks like at the time. I mean, he'll go from keeping.
And he's also not in Europe, so
100%, no question about it, and that does factor in without a doubt. But I think that at some point, I think that there has to be a conversation around, regardless of who's available, like we have to find a way to, I can't think of a better way to say it, but to simply progress the ball, being one of the things I'm talking about here. And we were never able to do that all season. And that's where I think that there may be, and probably myself included in this, some folks who are maybe starting to lose faith in Ange long-term.
Well, and I think, I agree with y'all that it did feel like Ange was not putting everything into this away leg and really, focusing more on the home leg. But I also don't think the performance that we saw was what he was looking for. Like he was pretty open about that after the game, that, it was not the execution of the tactics that he was expecting from the players. And he kind of also made some excuses about like the pitch surface, which we don't usually hear that from him. So that was kind of disappointing. But, it was clear that the players were not at their best. And I think for me, I'm not ready to write him off as a manager, but this game did kind of give me, some cause for concern in the sense that earlier in the season, when we were at the worst of the injury crisis, it felt like he was still getting the most he could out of the players who remained. In this game, it kind of felt like the motivation was not there. And that is part of his job as the manager, to make sure that the players are up for it. And, that was lacking, I felt like, in this performance. So I agree. I don't think we're going to see him leave personally, but, there are some questions to be asked, to be fair.
It's a good point, Caroline. I look at Thursday and we honestly lost every single loose ball against Alkmaar.
Yeah, it was bad.
I can't think of one that we won. I'm no exaggeration. And that is down to effort and desire. And if those things are lacking, maybe that's why we've looked absolutely devoid of ideas and creativity. I definitely see less movement off of the ball, without a doubt. Anyways, I think it's a fair point.
This is the first time, though, that I've heard even from Caroline, a little bit from Todd, like Scott. I think you've been a little bit more on this way too, of like questioning him, and I'm kind of leaning toward where you are, Caroline. I've from Jump Street with Ange, I've always said this is a rebuild that's going to take 3 full seasons, and I thought that he could be evaluated after about 2 to 2.5 of those seasons as to where we are. If we get to the end of this calendar year or near the end of this calendar year, 2025, like I'm talking into next season, I don't want to see Ange go in the summer, regardless of what happens in the Europa League or the league left. But I am starting to see the cracks a little bit, just in terms of things you said, Caroline, motivation, the plan. I was really discouraged, honestly, to see, taking it back to the Bournemouth match from Sunday, just the lack of ideas, it seemed, from the players. Like they kind of seemed a little bit confused as to what they should be doing. That's not something that should be happening 3/4 of the way through a season. I don't care who's been around or who hasn't been around or what injuries there have been. Guys should not be looking confused out on the pitch.
And there was that kind of, viral clip going around of Son and Madison chatting on the bench, and I'm not a great lip reader, but other people were saying that it looked like, Madison saying something like the same play, basically what you're saying, like where's the adaptation? And, I think for myself with Ange, my biggest complaint has always been the game management, but that also goes for game to game. And I think that's kind of where he has missed the mark in recent weeks. Cause even, after that City game, it was like, is that gamble going to pay off that he, we've got our top players going in cold into the Europa League game. So.
Well, yeah. and you use the word there that I think detractors of Ange have been using for months now, not just the last handful of weeks. And that's adaptation. Like he has not adapted to what is in front of him at times. And TC, you're going to want to disagree, but he hasn't but I think
you can't just you just can't patently say that he hasn't adapted when we've seen him play 5 different formations in the last 3 months alone, and he's rotated in 20 different players. Like you can't tell me that there's no adaptation. Like that is the epitome of adapting and overcoming.
I agree with you, Todd, that he has tried to adapt. What I said earlier about Areola does it very well. I don't think Ange does it as well because I agree. We've had a terrible injury crisis, but that does not constitute the level of poor play that we've seen this season. And I'm just going to say this, and I know how it sounds, and I want to separate myself from just the reactionary discourse that we've seen all season. But sometimes I wonder if Ange doesn't have the experience as a tactician to be a tactician in the Premier League. It's a very, very hard job. And there is a difference between being a tactician in Japan and at Celtic than there is in the Premier League. And that's where I say I have to separate myself from the reactionary discourse because I know how I sound right now, but I do believe there's some truth in what I'm saying. And I'm not painting Ange in that light. I'm just asking the question, is he maybe not experienced enough as a tactician to make the adjustments required to get through a Premier League season? There's always going to be injuries. Like we are never, ever going to go a season where we don't lose 3 or 4 key guys. What are you going to do when that happens, right, is my question.
No, I understand where you're coming from on that. And we'll kind of get off this topic here in just a moment. But from my perspective, adapting out of an Areola-based system in the Premier League is a hell of a lot easier from a week-to-week basis with the players you may have in the academy than it is to try to adapt to an Ange system with players that don't fit Ange systems because Levy didn't buy them in the summer. And so we're making do with what we got because other people are injured. And we're trying to make them fit the system because Ange's whole thing is philosophy first and we're all about it. Trying to adapt and be successful in the Premier League with an Ange system requires the players to do so. We haven't seen good enough execution from our players when called upon this entire season. And I don't know how you can look at Ange and say, I don't think Ange is the type of tactician that can make it through a Premier League season when we've got people missing sitters left, right, and sideways all season long.
Dude, we have not created chances this season. There's moments where we missed opportunities, but if you look across the entire season, I can't say, oh, we've just missed chances and Ange is fine. Like I can't say
I wouldn't blatantly say it like, oh, we've missed chances and Ange is fine. All I'm saying is that if you look at last season versus this season and the way that we played and how we did things and the chances that we created and where we were able to make things happen, what we said all last season was, oh, man, these chances are awesome. We just need somebody to put them away. We just need somebody to put them away.
Last season.
And then we hold on, dude. When we brought in Solanke at the beginning half of this season, he was doing those things. And then we got injured across the board. Those chances go away. And then we're like, gosh, just what the hell, Ange? And it's, not accurate.
I think I'm going to have to side with Scott here in the sense that it's not that he hasn't made any changes. He has. They've just been too reactive. Like we've been on the back foot for weeks now in terms of him actually switching up the lineups, giving players a chance who had not had a chance earlier in the season. Like, I feel like every time he's made a change, it's been a couple games too late. So
Yeah.
I do think a lot of the chatter around this game today was the fact that we're not creating chances at the rate we used to earlier in the season. Like, we're not scoring the goals, because that was what was really keeping us afloat, even when the injury crisis was starting to ramp up. And, now it feels like the players are trying to maybe adapt to a new way of thinking, but it's either not clicking or we just don't have the right players for it, but something is not.
Ding,
working.
ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
Right.
We
Well,
don't have the right players
and
to plug
TC,
in when our primary players.
But Ange can only work with what he has to work with. So there is
facts. And so, and if those players don't execute when put in those positions, we've been crying out for an Odebear, Solanke, and Johnson for a long time. Right? Oh, this is going to be awesome. Hey, we're going to play balls into the channel and let those guys cross in. Exactly.
Really?
That's
I
my
cannot say that
point.
I've ever called for that.
Yeah, I've never called for that either.
I've seen, not me, but I've seen that online. Like, oh, we got to mix it up. Sun's washed. Like, he needs a break, blah, 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 blah. Like, oh, if we had an Odebear running at people and Johnson on the other side for the Odelap and Solanke cleaning up all the breaks. Anyway.
Look, Sun and Madison are still our most productive duo, and that is the reality.
Decky, Sun, Madison are they are the spine of this team in so many different ways. And when you remove all of them, so we literally, the only captain of our leadership group that we had on the team on the pitch to start this match today against Bournemouth was a fragile-legged Romero.
Look,
technically Vicario is in the leadership group now. He's just not a vice captain.
Right.
Yeah.
Todd, you say that, and I agree with you. Madison, Son, and Kulusevski are our best three players, and still hasn't figured out how to get two of them on the pitch together. Like, it's either Decky or Madison. Like, that's something that needs addressed. And I'm not coming at Ange when I say that.
No, dude, and that's a personnel issue. That's a Rodrigo Bentancur and Yves Bissouma not being good enough to play the six, and us not being able to play Archie Gray there.
I fully agree with you. I think that's really well said. I also want to go back to last season. We took over half of our points in the first 9 matches. So, yes, last season was exciting. And again, I know there was injuries, but since that Chelsea match where everything went to shit and we had 9 players on the pitch, we have been super rocky. Like, we have not been stable at all since that happened. And I know, again, I understand there's an injury crisis. But stability has to come at some point, right? Is all that I'm saying here. It has to. And this is an overused trope, and I'm sorry, but when I look at Postecoglou and I look at Iriola, I think Postecoglou makes one incredible dish, but it may take a long time to get all those ingredients for that one dish that he makes really well. Where I think, and I'm not saying hire Iriola at all. I'm talking about him because we just played Bournemouth, right? But when I look at Iriola, I think he can walk into a kitchen, figure out what ingredients are there, and whip up something that looks pretty good, right, with what's available to him. And that's where I still have questions about Ange. And it's not just Ange, it's honestly modern football. Like, managers nowadays have one way that they do things, and they stuff it down the throat of their team until it either works or most likely doesn't, and they get sacked, right? The breed of manager
we saw that with the last couple of managers before Ange.
Oh, for sure, 100%. Even Poch, Poch was that way. It just worked, right? But there are very few managers out there who are super well versed. Ancelotti's like the last of a dying breed, right? And that's, again, probably just modern football more than Ange Postecoglou. But I definitely put Ange in that category, and that's part of my concern.
I'm gonna take your ingredient metaphor and go one further. A lot of this conversation to me feels very simply like a chicken and egg situation. Which is the culprit? Because I agree with what you're saying, Todd. The players, the full squad isn't there for what Ange wants to be able to do, and that is somewhat on recruiting, spending, whatever amalgamation of problems you want to lump on Levy, Enoch, all of that. And that's in one box. The other box is the adaptability box, which, again, I don't know which is the chicken and which is the egg in this metaphor. And I know the eggs are really expensive right now too. So you can throw that into the mix. It's a problem is basically what it is. Like, the left hand is not coordinated with the right hand right now. And until that happens, that's where I see the butting of heads to continue. And if the chicken is just going to go around stomping and crushing all of its eggs, i.e. sacking managers when things go poorly, like those eggs are never going to hatch into new chickens. Like, I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. So I don't know where I went with this metaphor or if it even made any sense, but like, to me, I want Ange to be here, but also I can recognize that what's going on right now is not acceptable. It's not good enough. I want to give it more time. Maybe I'm soft for that. I don't know, but
why would you be soft for wanting things to work?
No, it's not for wanting things to work.
With the current situation and like knowing that it's way easier to make it work with Ange by giving him the players and the time than it is scrapping it and starting all over again.
Well, because I'm not 100% sure that everyone is gonna hear what I'm saying and think, oh, this guy's not good enough. Like you just think he's a nice guy and he's cool in press conferences, and like that is part of what makes him more palatable. I will agree, but that's not what this is about. It's about having a plan and trying to execute it, rather than having a plan and at the first or second or even third sign of resistance, you just throw out the plan and have to start from scratch. That's not what I want to happen.
It honestly is so similar to what is happening on the women's side, though, because it's the same situation with Robert. He's a nice guy, which is a rarity in women's football. So I want to give him a chance, but it's the same thing. He's got a very specific style that only works when we have the proper players. And, we saw earlier in the season, we were just having these very limp, lifeless performances when we were missing key players like Drew Spence, or like Olivia Holt, who has just joined the club, but is already making herself very important. Evelina being out for so long, and once they come back, it's like, oh yeah, this team can play football. Like they can execute Robert's vision when they're actually all there. They're in fitness, they're in form, but you got, the eggs like and a chickie who are probably not going to hatch into what we want them to hatch into. So
I can't believe you just managed to get Chickie's name into an egg conversation. That's just, I know it's not intentional.
Well done.
I know it was not intentional, but my goodness, was that well done. Guys,
I completely agree with Caroline. Oh, sorry. Real quick. I'm just gonna ask the question, and I promise I'm not trying to pull out a specific answer here, but if Ange had a demeanor that was closer to Mourinho or Conte, would anyone still want him here based on what we're seeing on the pitch?
I think that's a really, really good question.
I think we don't even need to answer it, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. And so
know the answer.
Here's the difference, though. Here's the difference.
That makes us think.
So for me, it's much less about demeanor and it's much more about philosophy.
It's like about philosophy, but here's the other thing.
Conte and Mourinho was deplorable football.
And it is something to be said for having a manager who is not literally crushing the player spirits. Like that matters to me as a fan.
100%.
It's about something totally different than anybody's mentioned here, though. Because Todd, we are playing deplorable football right now as well. Like it's not the deplorable. It's not deplorable in the same exact way that it was under Conte and Mourinho, because that was boring and deplorable. This is also deplorable. It's just a little bit more exciting because players are running around like chickens with their heads cut off sometimes. And it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Like the difference between these two things for me is that Conte and Mourinho were brought in here knowing full well it was a short-term thing and it's win now. And like, there was no plan. It was, hey, let's try and win something. And while, yes, Ange kind of, I will say, and this is me personally, Andrew saying this, stupidly made the comment about I always win something in my second season, because that set himself up for nothing but failure. There was never anything good that was going to come out of saying that. While they are going to try and still go win something this season, right now this club is in the second season of, like I said, what should be at minimum a 3-year stint where winning something is not the priority. I know that winning something is always the priority, but for me, this is about establishing something and creating something. And that was never going to be the case under Conte or Mourinho, or God forbid, even Nuno. Here it's different. Ooh. And that's the difference between these two things. Like, that's why they're not comparable to me. So I get what you're saying, Scott. Like, yes, if Ange was an asshole, we would all be ready to just kick him out. But at the same time, he's not, one, and two, he was not brought in here to be an asshole and to be Conte or Mourinho and to win something immediately. He was brought in here because we realized that was the old way of doing things, and that was a bad way of doing things for this club and the way that it is built from a structure standpoint, not on the field, but off the field. This club is built to be a slow simmer and to slowly, like, this is not a fast food meal that he's cooking. Like, he's trying to cook a big Thanksgiving turkey with all the fixings and the sides, and that takes all day in the kitchen. Like, I'm sorry for all the food metaphors. If you're driving to work right now or ready for your lunch break listening to this, I apologize for making you hungrier, but like, my goodness, that is the metaphor I'm going with. Like, today, this is a slow burn, and if he doesn't allow, he being Levy, allow this to get to its end point without seeing it through, I will feel like they left something on the table.
Well, sure. You would almost feel as unfulfilled as, I don't know, maybe sacking one of the greatest cup managers in history 6 days before a cup final.
I just explained to you the difference between those two things. I'm not going to go into
I'm sorry. I was hungry. Realistically, Andrew, the Ange thing boils down to one simple fact, and that is if his name was Ryan Smith and he'd been coaching in Scotland or in the Championship for 4 years, as opposed to where he's been coaching, none of you motherfuckers would be talking about his inability tactically to do things. And the thing is that he is fighting an uphill battle because of where he managed previously and because of what type of football he plays and the fact that he's not going to sit on his laurels and cheekily tell you what you want to hear. He's going to say what he feels like a standard Australian bloke does. That rubs people the wrong way. So and the English media loves to turn a self-confident person into a puddle.
I think your argument would have some merit if we were an English pod, but like, I don't think any of us have an anti-Australian bias. Like, why?
No. You're not hearing what I'm saying. I'm sorry. What I'm saying is that
I get what Todd's saying.
Right. The collective narrative around Ange is, let's watch this brash Australian fail because he told us that he was going to succeed.
I love Australians. I've been to Australia.
I don't feel like in America we don't have
great.
that view of Australians at all. Like, we don't.
No. No. But they're not our colony.
TC, you're talking about a snobby English football mindset.
100%.
I get what you're saying, and that's
talking about Jonathan Liu at the Guardian.
And that is the pool in which Ange is currently swimming, right? With all these fucking sharks circling around, waiting to chomp on him as soon as he gets a cut. And so, as you're looking at there are three things at play here. One, Daniel Levy recognized the error of his ways and how much money he spent paying out Conte and Mourinho and Nuno, and Stellini, I think. Anyway, to sack them, as opposed to if he had just stuck with Pochettino and put all of that money into the project, we would have had a different situation. So I think he's learned from that. And I think that he has said, okay, I need a project manager and I need a guy with a great philosophy who's a player-first guy, who plays fun attacking football, who's going to be cheaper than most folks. I mean, who's going to come at a reasonable price and who is going to give us direction for the long-term future. And then the third thing is all of everything that they're doing is based off of a youth development approach. And the reason why is because you have to pay them less wages because Daniel's cheap as fuck. But if you have a youth and then you get to sell them off if they actually don't flourish for your team or whatever, and they still have the name value. Anyway, so building all of this youth through your system requires the faith in Ange, requires the faith in the project, requires you to weather the storm. We just didn't anticipate this much injury throughout the Ange tenure.
No, how could
And
you?
I feel like with the way that Daniel Levy does business, something always befalls him, right? You finally get Mourinho, fucking COVID, right? Like the end of the Harry Kane era, fucking COVID. And you finally get Conte, and we crap the bed halfway through the season. Can't figure out how to run an automation. Like, all these things come to pass. We finally get Ange, things are rolling, and we're absolutely decimated by injury. And it's like, I don't know, man. It's the Daniel Levy curse, maybe. I don't know.
It's just sports.
Geez, man. On that positive note, do you guys want to briefly talk about Christian Romero going to play for Argentina?
No.
Because that's the other thing that's kind of bubbling up this week. Look, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I know that a lot of people have feelings about Christian Romero and just the way that he has approached his career at Tottenham Hotspur to this point. Many people don't believe he's going to be here next season. I think I would count myself slightly among those people. But what are our thoughts on this? Do we have any massive objections to it? Are we going to raise a stink, or is this just the nature of doing business with a player of this talent and this caliber that is going to kind of do what they want to do?
I mean, in an ideal world, he could use this international break to build up some much needed game fitness, but it's Tottenham and it's Romero. So it's probably not how it's going to play out. So I'm at the point where I'm just trying not to have any feelings about it.
I'm not really bothered by it. First of all, I'm sure it's in his contract that when he's called up to Argentina, he's allowed to go always. And I'm sure that's in the majority of contracts, right? But I think when you're Romero, and it's not his fault that his return to fitness times with an international window, and obviously Argentina is always going to call him up. They're not going to look at the situation and say, no, we don't want Christian Romero involved. And we all know how passionate that group is about their national team responsibilities. So I don't know. I'm not terribly bothered by it. But it could also be because I've written Romero off a while ago. You guys know that. I think he's certainly gone this summer. And I think Danzo and Van de Ven will be a fine partnership.
So I'm gonna add a little nuance here and say that Christian Romero put out a post on Instagram about 15 minutes after the match. And please forgive the translation here, but it says, after a difficult period and full of things that happened in the middle, I am back with the group and happy to be able to help the team. Surely there is a lot to correct and work on, but we are together and eager to reverse the situation. See you on Thursday. We will come back stronger than ever, all together at Spurs Official. And then this is the key to this entire post. Grateful to the physios of AFA Selección for getting me out of the bad time and putting me back on the court where I am so happy. Thank you all for the support as always.
That's so good.
I did not see that twist coming, but I should have. That was like
so good.
He's out at the end of the season. He's
so
leaving.
Dude,
God, I can't wait to get that money from Real
Adios.
Madrid. Let's fucking go.
Imagine a world where Real Madrid doesn't offer Christian Romero a contract, and he says, "No, I think I'm good at Spurs. Like, I appreciate the interest in coming to start for Real Madrid, but I think I'm pretty happy finishing bottom of the table."
Then you know what? For the 15 to 20 games a season where he's healthy and can play, have at it, buddy.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Sure.
Like, if we're gonna get to that, if we're gonna get to that point. Like at that point, I'm just wow.
Play stupid games, get stupid results. That's all I'm gonna say.
Wild.
My biggest thing is that he's going to go to Spain and be fucking Sergio Ramos for a decade. That's the thing, is that the game is totally different over there. He's never.
I don't think his body has a decade in him.
You might be right, given how many miles are already on it.
A total smoke screen this whole time. Then yeah, I can't see that happening.
There may be some validity to that.
Yeah, that's an insane. I had not seen that post. You're right. We started recording, and
is this helpful, Christian?
I'm a little speechless, to be perfectly honest. But that's a good find, TC. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. And
happy to help. See you on Thursday. We will come back stronger than ever, all together. Spurs Official.
Look, I was just gonna say until you got to the part about the Argentina physios, I was like, that's a really well-crafted post, probably from his social media manager, right? Was my exact thought. And then you read the rest, and I'm like, oh, never mind. Romero definitely wrote that.
It's probably still from a social media manager, just with some influence. Would be my guess.
That feels like it came from the bus right after the match.
It's like, make sure you make it very clear where my loyalties lie.
Speaking of see you Thursday, we will see you Thursday for that second leg against Alkmaar. Let's just go around the room here. Confidence levels, starting 11 thoughts. We do know that There will be no Rodrigo Bentancur because of yellow card accumulation for this match. We also are probably, we talked about it earlier, probably not going to see Decky back for this match as well. But otherwise, it seems like a pretty fully fit team other than those two. I can't think of anything else that comes to mind about, injuries or issues that are new or anything else. So I'm confident Spurs can go and win this game and comfortably. Like, I'm looking at like a 3-1, a 3-0, something like that. I feel confident in that, but at the same time, it could very well just be a very boring 1-1 draw and Spurs go out on that. Like, I could see that happening. What are your guys' thoughts on basically Spurs season, and does it come to an end on Thursday? Don't everyone jump in at once.
Yeah, I know. I don't think it's going to come to an end on Thursday. I think we're gonna get through this. It's everything after that.
You sound so incredibly confident, Caroline. You sound so confident.
I just
because you're not. Let's be honest.
I'm not. I'm thinking about the fact that we've got Frankfurt on our side of the bracket, right? Like, I don't know. It's going to be tough, and I think the team really is going to have to find some reserves of motivation and confidence in themselves to get through this season in a satisfactory manner. That's all I'm going to say.
I do.
But they can.
I agree. And I do think we get through. But I don't say that fully with my chest. I would maybe say, right, I think we will, but I'm concerned. I mean, again, we won't paint the picture incorrectly here. Alkmaar smoked us last week, just absolutely smoked us. And it's easy to say, oh, we play in the Premier League, you play in the Eredivisie. Thursday told us maybe that doesn't matter, right? So there's going to have to be a big adjustment. I think that if Basuma's at the 6, we're in big trouble, and I hope that Ange agrees with me. I think you have to. I would like to see Archie Gray. I don't think that's going to happen.
He's not going to do that.
No, that feels very much like we'll get this sorted out all offseason and you'll be our 6 next year type of thing, right? But I think I personally would prefer to see Sarr, Bergvall, and Madison as the midfield. And then up top, you have to play Son. You have to play Solanke, and I'd play Tell on the right. I think we need to see what Matthias Tell can do when he's not at the 9. But
it's because he's not a 9.
Yeah. Well, and the other interesting thing is Mikey Moore. I wouldn't mind if he's on the right. Mikey Moore looked really good against Alkmaar in the group stage, probably our best player on the pitch. And it's interesting to me, curious, we'll say, that we haven't seen him feature at all in a while. I don't know what's going on there. People want to cite protection, and I'll always say this. If Rooney's protected, if Michael Owen's protected, if Lamine Yamal's protected, the future could have been, or the present could be different, we could say, right? So just because someone's 17 doesn't mean you always have to just protect them. Mikey Moore's a very talented player, and he was catching some steam right when he stopped playing. So I'm curious what's happening there.
I'm fascinated by your thought about putting Tell on the right, or more. I mean, anyone else. I personally think that Tell is a 9 long term, but I wouldn't hate seeing it in the short term on the wing. Well, I don't know that. He's 19. I'm not going to make any rash judgments.
He's maybe 19, dude, and he's going to get older and he's going to fill out and all the things. I'm looking at the profile of strikers that are successful over a long period of time in England, and they don't look like Matthias Tell.
That's fair enough.
They Dominic Solanke. They look like Erling Haaland. They look like they can fight Virgil van Dijk for
That's fair. I think there's time for Tell to grow into his body still. That's where I'm at. I'm talking about long term. Short term, I'm fine with mixing it up with him and figuring out where he is. What I'm even more interested in is this the first match we get Romero Van de Ven as a center back pairing? And what do you do with the fullbacks from there as well? Because I don't know that you want
Spence and Udogie for sure. Yeah.
Spence and Udogie.
Okay, so Gray just gets left out. You wouldn't.
Spence and Gray is what I would go with, honestly. I think
that's where I was That's what I was leaning.
That's actually a really good shout. I just say Udogie plays because he played for 5 minutes today. And
that's where my head was at as well. I wouldn't mind Archie Gray on the right for Spence, and then
100%.
bring Spence on, change of pace depending on which your left or your right back needs help. To be fair, I think Jed Spence playing inverted is a better left back in this system than he is a right back. But
yeah, I agree with that. I also think the other interesting thing is I don't think Porro is going to start because he played, extensively today, but we may need a Pedro Porro cross to find a goal in this game because we, again, can't progress the ball and can't create opportunities. And I'm like kind of joking, but I'm also I'm really not joking, right? We may need a Pedro Porro cross to find an opportunity in this game at some point. So I don't know if you start Porro, but I would expect to see him at some point.
I imagine Son starts.
Oh,
I imagine Madison starts.
Yep.
I imagine Johnson starts. Ange loves Brennan Johnson. I don't know why. It's not. Now, when you look at the numbers, you go, okay, well, maybe you understand it.
I'm fine with Johnson starting if he's got a Madison or a Bergvall or someone that can get him the ball in the right spot. Like I'm not saying Brennan Johnson doesn't offer anything. I'm saying Brennan Johnson can't be Dejan Kulusevski. He can't be
100%.
the guy that's creating the offense. He has to be the guy that's on the other end, crossing it in, hitting it back across the face of goal. That's kind of where I'm at. We'll see.
I think we win 3-1. By the way,
I hope so. I would very much like it. I'm very much in favor of Tottenham Hotspur winning football games, and they're going to have to on Thursday if they would like to advance in the Europa League. We will see. It is another Thursday-Sunday week for Spurs, so we'll be back with you Sunday. Of course, the second leg against Alkmaar Thursday is the important one, but they also have a trip to Craven Cottage on Sunday to face Fulham. Then it will be an international break for the men. The women, meanwhile, are coming back from international break. They will face Brighton at home next Sunday, so we'll chat about that one as well. Anything else before we get out of here, Todd? Are you going to hit me with a really important, crazy question before we get out of here today, or
it's just one? It's just one. If the season were over today, do you sell or let go of the loan, or do you try to keep Matthias Tel?
Oh, I want him.
Long term. Keep 100%. You're being way too negative on him, man. He's not been getting the service to show what he can do. That's how I feel.
Well, and I would say that in the opportunities when he has been provided the service, he's fluffed his lines. So, I've watched him
had shots on target, which is more than
he also has not played. He has not been playing enough football. He was not playing, and then he got thrown into playing a lot for us, and now he's starting to show the signs of that. He's so young and got to learn. I'm all in on Tel.
Do you start him over Dominic Solanke, who you paid $50 million for?
No.
Okay. No, we're all on the same page. We're all on the same page. Hold on. So this is the important question: are you going to be able to give Matthias Tel enough minutes to first give him the development that he needs to grow into the quote unquote 9 that you guys think he is, even though he's a 7? But if you think that this is who Matthias Tel can be, are you going to be able to give him enough games, especially when you know Ange is going to favor the pressing capabilities and the cleanup duty of a Dominic Solanke in order to necessitate the cost that it's going to cost you 50, 60 to keep him in the summer and give him enough minutes for development? Or are you just going to buy him because it's a good deal and we got a good look at it and he's a promising player, and then he's either going to sit or you're going to have to loan him out?
I think that his prospects for a 9 are more long-term for me, and his prospects to play anywhere else across the front line are let's see him. He's a young, exciting, dangerous prospect, and I want to see him anywhere he can fit. So yes, I think the minutes will be there for him.
I'm gonna double down and say I think he starts on one of the wings on Thursday. I think that he didn't play today for that reason. Odegaard played 90 minutes. I don't expect Odegaard to start on Thursday. Johnson played, I don't know how many minutes, but a significant amount of them today, right? Same thing. I think we're not going to have space behind the back line on Thursday. Johnson doesn't make any sense for me. I think Matthias Tel, first of all, I answer your question. Yes, you buy him. I think he can take his man on. I think he's able to cut and shoot with either foot. And we're going to need guys who want to put the ball in the net in this match. So I go Son, Solanke, Tel, and I'm going to double down and say that Tel starts at one of the wings.
And in the long term, I feel like going to be moving on from Richarlison, so he will be the
agreed.
backup striker, and he's going to get the minutes because unfortunately, Solanke does not seem to be as durable as he was with Bournemouth just because of the way we play. So he's going to have the minutes available.
See, and I see where you're at on that. I like Scott's shout for Thursday when it comes to Mikey Moore because of how many minutes Odegaard played, and especially because we're not going to have a ton of space. So
yeah, but Moore is one of those players that Ange is just being really weird about, like kind of like he was with Spence earlier in the season. I that's one of the many reasons
we don't know.
I have some doubts
We
about
don't know.
Ange. You know.
Well, I mean, you say that, right? But like, look at Spence. When Ange got his hands on Spence, he sent him to Genoa because he wasn't ready. And now he came back and he's been able to, like, Ange is one of Spence's favorite people. And Spence is an indispensable player. Yeah, I said that.
But he was still playing mind games with him even this season, which to me is just not great.
Interesting. I mean, man management is something that, Ange clearly has a certain way of going about it. But his team seems to love him for it. We're all in this together is still the thing that they're talking about collectively as a team. So,
unless they're going to their international club for medical help, and that's a totally
that just speaks to the shitness of the physio at Tottenham Hotspur, which I've been banging on about for years.
Apparently not on the women's side though, because Ella Morris was singing their praises in her last
new group
interview.
Let's get them working on the men's side then. What the hell are we doing out here? Oh, that's gonna do it for this edition of the Tottenham Depot. Be sure to check out our episodes on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. Also, leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice to help spread the word about the show. You can follow us on the socials at Tottenham Depot. You can follow Scott at Scott G Bird. You can follow Caroline at CG Stefko. You can follow Todd at TC__ show on X or at the Todd Father on Blue Sky. And you can follow me at A Stefka. And yes, once again, follow us at Tottenham Depot on the socials. We'll be back next week to either hold a funeral for our season or praise be. Let's let Spurs get into the quarterfinals of the Europa League and keep this thing going. We will talk to you next week. This has been the Tottenham Depot podcast. As always, come on, you Spurs.